I was the stupid kid my teacher destroyed. 20 years later, I held her heart in my hands. My fourth grade teacher told my parents I was mentally deficient and should be institutionalized. Last month, I was the cardiac surgeon who saved her life. She had no idea who I was until I made sure she did. I need to tell this story because I've been carrying it alone for 2 decades, and the weight of what happened last month is crushing me in ways I didn't expect. My name is Dr. Michael Chin now. But in 1994, I was just Mike. The kid who couldn't read out loud without stumbling, who took twice as long as everyone else to finish tests, whose stutter made every presentation a public humiliation. I had severe dyslexia and a speech impediment that made me sound, in the words of Mrs. Patricia Holloway, functionally retarded. She said that to my parents in a formal meeting. I was 9 years old, sitting outside the classroom while she explained to my mother and father that I was dragging down her other students, that I clearly had developmental delays, and that the kindest thing would be to move me to a special institution where I could learn life skills, instead of wasting everyone's time pretending I could handle real academics. My mother cried the entire drive home. My father didn't speak for 3 days. Mrs. Holloway made sure everyone knew I was different. She'd have students read aloud in a circle, and when it came to me she'd sigh loudly and say, "Let's just skip Michael so we can actually finish the chapter today." The other kids laughed. Every single time. She marked my tests in red pen with comments like, "Did you even try?" and "This is illegible. See me after class about special placement." She never graded my work on content. Just on how messy it looked, how many spelling errors, how long it took me. I started having panic attacks before school. I'd throw up in the bushes outside the building. I begged my parents to let me stay home. I told them I was stupid, just like Mrs. Holloway said. That I'd never be able to learn like normal kids. My mother, an immigrant who barely spoke English herself, didn't know how to fight the system. My father worked 2 jobs and trusted that teachers knew best. They almost pulled me out. They almost believed her. Then my grandmother moved in with us. My grandmother had been a professor in Taiwan before immigrating. She didn't speak much English, but she understood humiliation. She understood what it meant to be underestimated. She spent 3 months just watching me struggle with homework. Then one night, she sat down next to me and put her hand over mine while I tried to write a sentence. My letters were backwards. I'd been staring at the same word for 15 minutes. She said something in Mandarin I didn't understand at the time. Years later, my mother translated it, "They want you to quit because you make them uncomfortable. Smart children who learn differently are threatening. They expose lazy teaching." My grandmother taught me differently. She used colored overlays for reading. She let me dictate stories while she wrote them down. She turned math into physical objects I could manipulate. She celebrated every tiny victory and never once made me feel broken. By 5th grade I was reading at grade level. By 6th I was ahead. But Mrs. Holloway's damage ran deeper than academics. I saw her 3 more times during my childhood, each one a reinforcement of her original assessment. Once, in 7th grade, she was a substitute teacher in my English class. When she called roll and got to my name, she looked up, recognized me and said, "Oh, you're still in regular classes? How optimistic." My classmates didn't laugh that time. A few looked uncomfortable. But no one said anything. The second time was at a school district event when I was in 10th grade. I just won a regional science fair for a project on cardiac cell regeneration. Early research that would eventually lead to my specialty. Mrs. Holloway was there as a veteran teacher being honored for 30 years of service. She saw me at the awards table and walked over. "Michael Chin," she said, looking at my medal. "I have to say, I'm surprised you made it this far. You must have had a lot of help." She said it kindly. Like a compliment. Like she was proud of the helpers, not me. I didn't respond. I was 16 and still afraid of her. The third time was at my high school graduation. She stopped my parents in the parking lot and told them she was so glad I'd found my path, and that not everyone needs college. I had a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins. I buried myself in pre-med. Every time I struggled, and I did struggle constantly, I heard her voice telling me I wasn't capable. That I was wasting everyone's time. Medical school was brutal. My dyslexia made anatomy textbooks a nightmare. My stutter came back during oral exams under stress. I failed my first clinical skills assessment because the evaluator said I didn't communicate clearly enough to be trusted with patients. I almost quit 6 times. But something my grandmother said kept me going. She told you who she thought you were. You don't owe her the satisfaction of being right. I matched into cardiothoracic surgery. I did my fellowship at Stanford. I published research. I became one of the youngest attending cardiac surgeons at a major hospital. And I never forgot Patricia Holloway. I didn't look her up. I didn't follow her career. But I thought about her every single time I doubted myself in the OR, every time a patient trusted me with their life, every time a younger surgeon asked me for guidance. I thought, she wanted me institutionalized. She wanted me to disappear. And now I was holding human hearts in my hands and putting them back together. Then last month I got the case that would change everything. Patricia Holloway, 68, severe mitral valve regurgitation, emergency surgical candidate. She'd been in heart failure for months, refusing surgery, until she collapsed at a teacher's retirement dinner and was rushed to our ER. I saw the name on the chart and felt my hands go numb. I should have recused myself immediately. That's protocol. Any personal connection to a patient, you step away, you let someone else take the case. But I didn't. I told myself I needed to confirm it was actually her first. That's what I said when I walked into her pre-op room. She was smaller than I remembered. Well, hooked up to monitors, oxygen cannula in her nose, looking terrified in the way all cardiac patients look when they realize their body has betrayed them. She looked up when I entered. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Dr. Chen, I'll be your surgeon today." "Have we met?" she interrupted, squinting at me. "You look familiar." My heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it on her monitors. "I don't think so," I said. "Let's talk about your valve." I explained the procedure. She didn't remember me. 20 years of my life shaped by her cruelty, and I was completely invisible to her. I could have walked away then. I could have done the right thing. Instead, I prepped for surgery. The OR was freezing like always. My team was ready. The anesthesiologist had her under. I stood over Patricia Holloway's open chest, her heart exposed, beating weakly under my hands. This was the moment I'd fantasized about, in my darkest moments of medical school. The vindication. The power. The poetic justice of this stupid kid, holding the life of his tormentor. But standing there, scalpel in hand, all I felt was tired. Her heart looked like every other failing heart I'd repaired. Damaged, struggling, human. I did my job. I replaced her valve. I closed her up. She came through perfectly. And in recovery, when she woke up confused and groggy, I was there. "Mrs. Holloway," I said quietly, "the surgery went well. You're going to be fine." "Thank you, doctor," she whispered. "Do you remember Michael Chin?" I asked. She blinked slowly, the medication making her unfocused. "Who?" "Your student. 4th grade. 1994, you told my parents I should be institutionalized." I watched her face change. The confusion. The slow recognition. The horror. "You told me I'd never amount to anything," I continued, my voice steady. "That I was dragging everyone down. That I was retarded." Her mouth opened but nothing came out. "I operated on your heart today. I saved your life. And I need you to know, I did it because that's my job. Not because you deserved my mercy. But because every patient deserves the best care, even the ones who tried to destroy me." Tears started running down her face. "I need you to live," I said. "I need you to go home and think about every child you wrote off. Every kid you humiliated. Every future you tried to steal because they learned differently than you expected." She reported me. Filed a formal complaint with the hospital about unprofessional conduct and emotional abuse of a patient in a vulnerable state. There was an investigation. I was interviewed by the ethics board. I told them everything, that I'd recognized her name, that I should have recused myself, that I confronted her in recovery. I didn't lie. I didn't make excuses. The board was split. Some wanted me suspended. Others pointed out that the surgery was flawless, that patient care was never compromised, that my confrontation was simply telling a patient the truth about our shared history. In the end, I received a formal reprimand and mandatory counseling sessions. Mrs. Holloway tried to escalate it. She contacted local news, framing herself as a vulnerable elderly patient attacked by a surgeon with a grudge. She claimed I'd been a troubled student with behavioral issues who was now retaliating decades later. But then something unexpected happened. Other students came forward. A woman who'd been in my 4th grade class wrote a letter to the hospital board describing Mrs. Holloway's classroom as psychologically abusive, detailing how she'd regularly humiliated struggling students and recommended special education placements for any child who challenged her. A former colleague from Mrs. Holloway's school district submitted documentation showing she'd been investigated twice for inappropriate treatment of students with learning disabilities, investigations that were quietly buried. 6 more former students shared their stories. One was now a lawyer. One was a teacher herself who said Mrs. Holloway's methods had inspired her to never make a child feel worthless. One had dropped out of school entirely after being in her class and was only now, at 34, getting his GED. The news story Mrs. Holloway tried to plant backfired. Instead of surgeon attacks patient, it became teacher's decades of abuse exposed. She deleted her social media. Her retirement community asked her to step down from the education committee. Former colleagues distanced themselves. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Holloway sent a letter to the hospital addressed to me. The board forwarded it with a note asking if I wanted it delivered. I almost said no. But I opened it. It was 4 pages, handwritten, difficult to read. She has tremors now, probably from the heart condition. She didn't apologize. Instead, she explained how she'd been overwhelmed, how class sizes had grown while resources shrank, how she'd been taught that students like me were unteachable, and that pushing for special placement was advocating for appropriate services. She said she thought she was helping me by being realistic about my limitations. She said she was a product of her time, of her training, of a system that didn't understand learning differences. She said she was sorry I'd been hurt, but that I'd misunderstood her intentions. At the very end, she wrote, "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old woman who was only trying to do her best." I read it 3 times. Then I wrote back. My letter was shorter. Dear Mrs. Holloway, I received your letter. I understand you believe your intentions were good. I'm sure you told yourself that for 20 years. You didn't misunderstand your impact. You chose not to see it. There's a difference. I'm not interested in your forgiveness or your justifications. I'm interested in your silence. You will not contact me again. You will not speak about me publicly. You will not attempt to reframe this story as a misunderstanding between a well-meaning teacher and an oversensitive student. In return, I will not pursue further action regarding the other students who have come forward. I will not add my voice to calls for your teaching license to be retroactively reviewed. I will not share the full documentation I've gathered about your pattern of abuse. We're done. I saved your life because it's my job to save lives. Not because you earned it. Not because I forgive you. But because I am not the person you tried to make me believe I was. Live with that. Dr. Michael Chin. I don't know if that was the right thing to do. My therapist says I'm still processing. That confronting her reopened wounds I thought had healed. My grandmother died 5 years ago. She never knew I became a surgeon. She had dementia by then and didn't recognize me the last 3 years of her life. I think about her more than Mrs. Holloway now. I think about how one person saw a struggling child and decided he was broken. And how another person saw the same child and decided he was just learning differently. I think about the 9-year-old boy who threw up in the bushes every morning because he believed he was stupid. And I think about the surgeon I became, and how close I came to never existing because one teacher couldn't imagine a world where intelligence looked different than she expected. Mrs. Holloway is recovering well. Her cardiologist says her valve replacement was expertly done, and she should have many more years ahead of her. I hope she uses them to think about the children she broke. I hope at least one of them haunts her dreams the way she haunted mine. And I hope, though I'm not sure I'll ever really believe this, that I can finally stop carrying her voice in my head every time I doubt myself. I held her heart in my hands. I put it back together. But I'm still learning how to do the same for my own. Several people have asked if I regret confronting her. Honestly, I don't know yet. What I do know is that for 20 years she never had to face what she did. She retired with honors, probably told people she loved teaching. Maybe even believed she'd been a good teacher. Now she knows. Now she has to live knowing that the child she wanted to institutionalize grew up to save her life. I don't need her apology. I don't need her to understand. I just needed her to know. And maybe that's enough.